the amount of times that, I've been involved in doing things that people said you shouldn't do or you can't do.
Yeah.
That's the famous thing. You can't do that or that won't work.
Yeah.
Really trying to make your own decisions and taking that risk for your life, with your life.
Yeah.
I think that's really makes a difference to people who sort of build businesses and those who work in them.
Welcome to The Little Black Book, a podcast for entrepreneurs by entrepreneurs who provide their first-hand experiences to help others learn and grow. This podcast is brought to you by Altitude Advisory. Altitude Advisory is a modern business advisory firm helping business owners build a better business for a better life. In this episode of The Little Black Book, I'm joined by Joe Collins. Joe is the founder and executive chairman of CAMS. He's been the driving force in building CAMS into a world leader in enterprise risk and performance management software solutions. Joe's vision and knowledge was of paramount importance in developing CAMS into a global business with a globally recognised brand. Established in 1996, CAMS has grown significantly to become an international company with clients and offices located in Australia, Sri Lanka, Singapore, New Zealand, UK and North America. In this episode, Joe talks about how he determined that at an early age the importance of bravery and creating your own path. He shares how this view set him up for his entrepreneurial journey. He discusses the sliding door moment where he left the public service and became unemployed to the establishment of his own business. He shares how he used CAMS experience as an IP in providing consulting services to fund the development and rollout of software products in a SaaS platform. Joe discusses the importance of productising your IP to create ongoing and consistent revenue streams. He also talks about the personal challenges he faced when stepping away from the CEO role and the transition process to induct the new CEO. He also shares the pride he has in the family business and how a number of his family have grown to become important and established parts of CAMS senior leadership.
Hi, my name is Joe Collins. I'm the executive chairman of CAMS. Really enjoying today and thank you very much for having me on The Little Black Book.
Favourite movie of all time? Do you have one?
Yes, I do actually. From Here to Eternity. It was,
okay.
It was. I like the older movies. I used to be a big fan of Bill Collins.
Yeah.
And I remember when my wife and I were having our first child, I wanted to call him Bill because I like Bill Collins so much. But I was banned, so because of that. Yeah. So I was always great at the Friday night older movies, and I particularly liked that one because just the complexities of the time and the different lifestyles and directions of the three key characters, Burt Lancaster and McKay. Big fan of Frank Sinatra's.
Yeah.
And his history.
Yeah.
That was this sort of, breakout time where he got that Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor. So it's a great film. It's well known for its racy beach scene between Deborah Kerr and Burt Lancaster. It caused quite a stir in 1953, adulterous wife, on the beach making love to a common sergeant. So I do like the
old. But it's interesting, you just mentioned there Bill Collins. You might be showing your age, and I've shown you a bit of mine too. But I still remember, Bill Collins on whatever night it was, or on the TV doing the intros to the movies and giving a bit of a back script of why he loved the movies and things like that. So it's definitely taking us back, mate, to a bit of TV history.
It's a bit ironical that my grandson's name's Bill.
Yeah.
So obviously the next generation forgot about Bill Collins, and I was quite pleased that they called him Bill.
What about as a book, mate, that you read as a child or a young adult that had a real impact on you, either professionally or personally?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I was probably a bit like you. If I had a football or a cricket bat and run around and didn't really sit still enough to read a lot. And but as I got older, it was quite interesting. I did actually get a bit of, this might not be good for my image, but I actually do like the odd poet. And I got a book in my teenage years, the collective works of Wilford Allen.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Wilford Allen was a poet, an English poet that was famous for his World War I collection. It's quite a sad story that he was killed in just a few months before the war finished. And if you read his collective works, it's really startling to see the change in pre the war as a really young man. He died at 25, so he was quite young. And he sort of ideally countryside sort of verse, and then you can see him sort of slowly changing into this sort of cold, hard, talking about the day-to-day misery of a soldier. And he was actually very anti the war.
Yeah.
When you read his history, it shows how he really didn't believe in it and didn't want to do it. Was injured a number of times, as you can imagine, I think he was there from about 1915 through.
Yeah.
And most of his work was all done in a 12-month period before he died. His sense of duty made him keep going back. And, that was really startling for me, that sort of waste of a talent and what he could have been if he hadn't got killed. But still, how we, sort of our duty makes us do things. I've always thought about, it's important to be independent and be your own man and not get pushed into places you don't want to go because, the government or the common thought says you should.
Yeah.
So that had quite a marked effect on me.
Yeah. And I think that's, that sort of philosophy, that independence or creating your own path, is a real common trait of entrepreneurs and of business owners. And I think it's an important characteristic that you need to have. So it's really interesting then how that sort of resonates, that, Wilford Allen sort of followed this path of doing it because, that sense of duty and having to do it, just because that's what everyone said that you had to do, or was socially acceptable, as opposed to doing things in a different way. So
it's a really good point, because in my own life, whether it be personal, but business in particular, the amount of times that I've been involved in doing things that people said you shouldn't do or you can't do.
Yeah,
that's the famous thing. You can't do that, or that won't work.
Yeah,
really trying to make your own decisions and taking that risk for your life, with your life.
Yeah,
I think that's really makes a difference for people who sort of build businesses and those who work in them. I think.
Yeah, and it's interesting. It's such a common trait, and especially in Australian culture or Australian business culture, the willingness or the speed at which people can tell you why something won't work or why you shouldn't do something, relative to somewhere perhaps like the United States that really has a greater level of, they've embraced entrepreneurship, I guess, a lot more than we have as a culture.
Well, I think I agree with that. I unfortunately, I think I've travelled a lot. I've had to travel a lot, and there is different cultures, wherever you travel around business, and, the UK culture is a different discussion again. But I do find that the establishment culture within some cities in Australia, does inhibit things.
Yeah.
And, what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. I've always had the philosophy, those people know me, I keep away. I'm very much under the radar sort of guy.
Yeah.
And, I like to get jobs done. I like to get it in. I like to motivate people. I find that many of the powers to be, whether it be government or some of the larger private sector organisations, can in fact be limited in their view. I mean, it's a lot easier to be a big fish in a small pond, isn't it?
Yeah. Mate, I know you've had a lot of opportunity over your life to travel and, experience things around the world. Is there any particular travel experience that you've had that's had a real transformative impact on you?
So many pubs and so little time. But I mean, it's interesting when you talk about that. And, yes, I have travelled a lot. And especially, funny enough, I didn't travel much before I was 40. Yeah. In my 40s, for a range of reasons. But, I found it was a huge eye-opener, landing in London for the first time. I felt like Barry McKenzie, except a smaller version, And I could talk about all the places I've seen, but, it's really interesting that the more you travel, the more you love Australia. I look back at my travel as, with my children at a young age and my wife, we did a lot of outback stuff. We did a lot of road trips up to Darwin and Northern Territory. And it's funny, so I could say I've been in New York, I've been here, but it was great because when you're really busy, those times you can have your family in a car and they have to talk to you, right?
Yeah.
And you have that quality time, and just that ability to see things together as a family unit. I think that had a marked effect, of great memories. So I look back at that stage with great fondness.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've got visions of you, mate, like Clark W. Griswold traveling around with the family in the car on a journey to Ayers Rock or something like that. So I could
what it was like.
I could just imagine. Before you started CAMS, you spent a lot of time, I guess, as an accountant or in the finance game and working in the public service space before into consulting and so on. What was the catalyst, I guess, for you to move out of your more traditional employment roles and consulting roles and start your own business, mate?
Well, I'm probably the world's worst accountant for a start. I did an accounting degree, but I was very much into operations, more corporate, around planning, reporting. I did a lot of work in information systems and decision support systems at a young age. So I was I did postgraduate management accounting. So I was always into, how do you align people? How do you actually have the right information to make the right decisions? And that really pressed my button. So a lot of my career has been around either managing people at an early age. I worked in the operations division of now SA Water.
Yeah.
I was what they call executive manager business operations. So that was really looking after all their sort of major construction maintenance and all the budgeting and planning and so forth. So, quite a big staff and leadership at a young age. But I moved into local government because local government were paying a lot more, and it was quite a common thing for successful accountants or corporate type people in the public sector to move to local government at the stage because, hell, you even got a car.
Yeah.
So, it was what everybody did. Lucky enough to be CEO, which in a council called Manapara, which is now merged with Elizabeth.
Yeah.
Which is Playford.
Yeah.
I did that job from sort of 31 to 38, but the amalgamation, you talk about sliding doors moments, the amalgamations between the two councils was very, this is 1996, was very political.
Yeah.
And different cultures. It's amazing how two organisations side by side in the same area have such different cultures.
Yeah.
But the bottom line there was that both the CEO of Elizabeth and myself weren't politically acceptable to either party.
Right.
Because we were seen as champions for that particular council.
Yeah.
And there's another story there that I didn't really want the job, and they got independent consultants to try to choose between the two of us, and it was the most stringent recruitment process I've ever saw, and went right through, and they put out a report 3 days before the two full council meetings to work out, initially who of the two of us could be the boss. And it was clear that they were going to nominate me. I didn't even want the job at the time. So anyway, I was going to get the gig. What happened was there was two councillors from a particular ward that voted with the Elizabeth councillors to not accept the recommendations of the independent body, right?
Yeah.
And so the whole thing went berserk. And, if you go back in history, what happened was that I was very much an industry champion for the horticulture industry. I was involved in, the Bolivar pipeline. I was involved in sort of promoting, getting funding for horticulture excellence and a whole range of other things. So I had quite a big affinity with the Virginia and the regional people there. So it was their two ward councillors that voted against me. So there was all sorts of backlash.
Yeah.
And apparently I'm told there was a true story. There was a death threat against one of these councillors.
Wow.
And I ended up being front page advertiser, death threat over CEO's election. I was on Channel 2's first event on Channel 2, 7, 9 and 10 News.
Yeah.
And I remember at the time, it was the first time I ever actually took a sleeping pill.
Yeah.
It was huge pressure.
Yeah.
And it was quite ironical that I didn't really want the job in the first place. So that's when we moved on and the thing fell over. And eventually I knew it was a good thing for the community. So I went out to the press and said, I don't want the job. That forced the Elizabeth chapter to do the same.
Yeah.
Hence, I was 39, unemployed.
Yeah.
I went from thinking I'm somebody to knowing I was nobody.
Yeah.
which which is the mortgage, 3 kids. Where do you go from there?
Yeah.
So that was when I started the consulting company.
Yeah.
It was interesting. Yeah, I was actually headhunted or asked to apply for the CEO of Byron Bay.
Yeah.
And they flew me up there, and they had 12 people interviewed, and I was staying at the Club Med at the time.
Yeah.
I read the paper the next morning, and it said, Furor over CEO selection panel. I'm going, oh, God.
Don't need this.
So then I thought, thankfully, that I might not be offered the job, but sure enough, I got a phone call Monday, could you fly back? We're really keen.
Yeah.
And I made that decision then that I'd never, ever work directly for the public sector again.
Yeah.
Basically.
So, mate, you've been caught up in this, I'll call it, public crisis, if you like, out at Manopara, and then, going up for the other role. That's kind of forced your hand then into consulting. So how did you then transition from I'll call it a one-man band consulting, which, where you're basically consulting back to local councils and helping them out and doing things like that off your own bat. How did you then morph that into the business that we now know today?
Well, it wasn't sort of an overnight thing. It was planned, but the consulting company was quite successful in its own right. We were sort of 8-9 people within a short period of time, and we did all the things I had passion for. Strategic planning and had that links to risk and metrics and scorecards. It was really my core expertise. Yeah, and we were doing so much work that we needed to develop systems to support and streamline the consulting. So it was first starting out developing simple databases. We did a thing called the integrated strategic planning database with one of the councils, regional councils. Mm-hmm. And then I took a conscious decision that we would invest in the software, and it made sense, to move from, a service based to a product based. I was always keen on that. So, we started in the strategic planning database, sort of, how to put a plan on, how to put your metrics, how to report, and so forth. Yeah. But we always had a conceptual framework, how to sort of broaden it to risk and implementation of projects. Yeah. So, and, it was like taking funds from the consulting side in a planned way to fund the development of the software through the cloud. Yeah. So it probably took about 2 to 3 years of actually carefully reallocating the resources and building up subscription-based revenue. Of course, those who have done SaaS companies understand the value of the dev, which is, until you can actually start recouping your overall costs of actually implementing and maintaining and providing it on the cloud, you lose a lot of money. Yeah. So we were lucky in that we were using cash flow from a successful consulting business to offset that value of the debt. So we never really had a debt issue. We just had to manage cash flow and liquidity really carefully. Yeah. Yeah, to do that. Yeah. And then sounds simple, but it's not. Yeah. So, a lot of work.
But it's really interesting, and I just probably want to explore this a little bit further, mate, if I can. That there is so many advisors, with whether it be accountants or lawyers or surveyors or consultants or professional service people in that space that have so much, I'll call it IP and knowledge, but can't build the bridge of how to turn that into a product that then obviously generates revenue, not based on time or somebody's output. It's based off off another platform. Mm. Was it always completely obvious to you that's the way it needed to go, or was there a light bulb moment that said, okay, I've got something more valuable here, and I'm actually going to turn that into a repeatable revenue stream?
I always, even before I was doing the software, it was always about productising the consulting services. Yeah. How to template it, how to make sure that people at different levels were providing the right input at the right level and you're getting return for resources, because that's my core expertise today. So, I was always had that even before the software to actually standardise and productise certain outputs. Yeah, yeah. And, with some of your background understands that if you actually look at your resource pool and cash flow and be able to pull different levers within an organisation to compensate that cash flow, you can actually plan your way out.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of times where was touch and go, but you've got to have a strategy, but you've also got to be, you know, the pivot's an easy word to say, but, you know, we took strategic decisions quickly when we opened up a service centre in Sri Lanka. We started off with 10 people. We have 300 people there now.
Yeah.
We own that 100%. Now, anybody who's tried to copy CAMS who haven't been able to do that have really struggled because the cost of development, you've got to have a right cost structure.
Yeah.
You know, the right sort of onshore, offshore, nearshore approach. So your costing structure is model fits projected cash flow.
Yeah.
Basically.
Mate, was there, you know, it's interesting, you know, I think it's really neat how you've been able to, I guess, carry those two different revenue streams, you know, with the consulting to support the product development side of things and until that was, I'll call it self-sustaining. Was there any particular, because they're very different business models, was that strategically hard to manage? And when did it become obvious that, you know, I suppose you had to cut back cut off the consulting side of things to go all in on the software and product side of things?
Well, it's a really good question. You know, in some way it was fortunate to us because we had such high subject matter expertise because of that consulting background that we were able to configure and design functionality that had right logic models and data flow. So that actually became a real competitive advantage because you've got credibility.
Yeah.
And even during the sales process, you know, pre-digital marketing, you know, when you had to go in front up for a tender and you're against, say, a Tech One who was trying to do something similar, and they'd come in with a strong finance ERP background, and we were able to explain how the outputs could be reused and how you'd roll them out through an organisation. So it actually created a competitive advantage. We're also very much a young company full of young, dynamic sort of people that love the change. So they actually were able to change with the company. It wasn't like you had 20 Joe Collinses who are all grey-haired and whatever. It was this real great young bunch of talent that kept with the company because they saw the company evolving, and they took that transition. And then you had to bring in certain people at certain times to give you that knowledge of how to operate.
Yeah.
And we made a lot of mistakes. Don't worry. I mean, you know, it was very much learned by mistakes many times, for sure.
Well, we'll often talk about failing fast. You know, get in there, do something. If it doesn't work, you know, try something else, modify it, try something else, and, you know, fail fast and get on with it until you solve it. And that's a massive key for growing businesses or evolving businesses. Yeah,
it certainly is. It certainly is. If you don't have that, you know, or if you're too, you know, I mentor a few SaaS CEOs, the most young CEOs, and you know, and I see that they've, you know, because they've needed capital, they've brought people in and you know, on boards and stuff, and they either haven't got the experience or perhaps they slow them down. Yeah, you know, you've got to have someone making quick decisions and moving quickly. And
yeah, no, for sure. Like that. Yeah, mate, you mentioned there about that sustainable or that competitive advantage that CAMS had over some of your competitors. Talk more about how you've been able to maintain that throughout the life of the organisation. A lot of businesses really struggle to identify what their competitive advantage is relative to their competitors. You guys seem really clear on what that is and why it's there. How have you been able to stay true to that?
We're really fortunate that our view of the world around performance and risk was much more holistic. So we were always a believer that enterprise risk had a strong link to governance and strategy. And that's what's part of our initial design. Yeah. Whereas a lot of the traditional SaaS software vendors were either strongly just compliance, or they would look at compliance or hazards or incidents, and then they would be quite weak at that linkage to strategy and governance. Yeah. We came from a conceptual framework that was quite superior. So over time, we developed, and we've really morphed into a pure GRC, global GRC solution with strong links to strategy and governance.
Yeah.
We started from a strategy and governance and worked into risk.
Yeah.
So what we've been able to do is been able to flank most of our competitors over all these years who as risk has grown into very much a corporate governance office of the CFO type issue.
Yeah.
Yeah. We've been able to go along and say, yes, we can do compliance, we can do incident management. And by the way, we can link to your strategy, and we can link back to your risk metrics, can link to your corporate metrics, can link to your scorecard.
Yeah.
So we've been able to actually appeal to people who understand the broader concepts of governance more.
Yeah.
And so that's enabled us to, really compete against those bigger organisations that's evolved through buying other companies.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a thing called logic models that, links sort of logical sequences of if this, then that.
Yeah.
We've been able to have logical frameworks that enable data to be transferred from one part of the system to the other without having other databases where you need to go and then develop logic to put it in somewhere else. So a lot of our competitors have overlap of systems. They'll buy two companies. They'll both have an incident management system having different elements.
Yeah.
They'll try to have one for one sort of vertical, one for another. We've never had that because it's always been one database, logically developed with configuration across all aspects of performance. So just had the governance, risk, compliance areas has been our major sort of global strategy.
Yeah, no, it's very, very good. You mentioned as the business grew and evolved that you had some pretty smart people that came in and stayed with you, and others you recruited in. You've now largely moved out of a lot of day-to-day management side of things. Talk us about your journey of transitioning from CEO, consultant, manager out to hand over the reins, if you like, to a management team, and now what it's like just to I guess mentor and manage the CEO that you've got.
Again, it's not an overnight thing, and it was complex to some degree because CAMS, there was always a strong family element in CAMS.
Mm-hmm.
I was very lucky. I had two sons who were both smarter than I am, and they came in as sort of working part-time while they were doing the university degree, and I had nieces and nephews, again, all people that were smart enough to do it. There was other relatives that might have liked, but they obviously weren't, we were very much choosing on who. It was very much a family approach. My wife did, my wife was first half employee, and so, we always recruited young people who wanted to make their way in life, and they all sort of became family. I came sort of like a quasi patriarch to these people, and I like to look after the ones who did the right thing. We always have a philosophy in camps that, you come in, you do the right thing by us. We do everything we can to invest in your development, and when you leave, do something bigger and better. We celebrate with you.
Mm-hmm.
So that is still part of our culture.
Yeah.
Once somebody works for CAMS, they tend to always be sort of a CAMS person, and that was fine. And we grew and grew and grew. And we had to bring people in. That culture was really positive.
Yeah.
But it became more difficult as the complexities of building a global SaaS company started to need specialists as opposed to generalists.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was very lucky that I'm a pretty good generalist.
Yeah.
But eventually we needed to bring people who were specialists in SaaS sales.
Yeah.
And of course, with the digital marketing world became really critical. So we were able to bring the right people in. Sometimes they jumped over, existing family members. But in particular, the two sons were, especially the older one, who's now 36-ish, started when he was sort of 17. He's very talented. He's now the COO. Yeah. And as he grew into a man, that became quite challenging because we're different characters. Yeah. And, to be honest, I found that very difficult when it came to a crunch. He had different views, I had different views, and in some ways I was, whether I could have gone on and kept being CEO or whether I wanted to is a good discussion, because I really didn't want to be put as the father put into that situation where I had to come into conflict on policy. Yeah. Yeah. we're great. We're all great. But so it was the right time to bring somebody in and for me to step back. So we always had that vision that even though we had a strong family culture, we were a professional organisation and the best person got the job. We brought the right people into it. There was never any doubt about, about whoever would be CEO was, had to be the best person, not a family member.
Yeah.
That was never an issue. In fact, my sons didn't want to be.
Yeah.
So they saw what it did to me over a long period of time. So
yeah,
I'm quite happy not to.
Yeah. Okay. So let's just talk about that. That journey of then appointing an external CEO. So you've made the decision. Okay, now's the time. I need to go and get somebody to succeed me. What was the process, and how did you go through the mentoring or management of transition through that process? Have you got any nuggets there that you can share?
Well, first nugget is culture always beats strategy. So make sure that whoever comes in is consistent with the corporate culture that you've built. Doesn't mean you can't change it.
Yeah.
But you need somebody who comes in and understands the values. If they haven't got that, it's not going to work. So, I'd been talking to quite a number for quite a while.
Mm-hmm.
And wasn't someone who went to a headhunter and said, find me somebody. You get to know people in the industry. I knew what our weaknesses were and that we needed somebody who was going to drive global revenue.
Yeah.
Had a strong history in that.
Yeah.
And, it's once you knew the capabilities.
Yeah.
And, somebody, and we knew where our strength was, it's a matter of getting somebody that actually we could complement.
Yeah.
And we brought somebody in who's been excellent, and he's taken the opportunity to learn, a more broader aspect. So it's worked out really well. And, he's got the same values that we have, and that's made it, really easy.
Yeah.
And he knows I don't want his job, but I just want him to be successful.
Yeah.
So that takes a lot of pressure off.
No, so I mean, the three key things there that I heard was, knowing exactly what you need in the CEO, understanding what their capabilities are, and making sure that they're a cultural fit for your organisation. Yeah. Any particular challenges for you in terms of the handover that you could share? Because sometimes there's this I'll call it this transition phase, if you like, where you pass the baton to somebody else that people experience, founders experience that loss of purpose or engagement or whatever it might be. Was there any challenges for you where you felt lost or otherwise in terms of what was next?
Absolutely. I had I think I struggled for quite a while. My pace has been travelling 6 months a year, opening up offices. I'd be travelling to Sri Lanka and then on to UK and then circle back through Singapore, and it was full on. Really full on and just driven, and it got almost an obsession for me.
Yeah.
So it was a bit like sort of being, okay, I've done the right thing. No one, we sold 30% of the company and we had money. Everybody knew how hard we had worked.
Mm-hmm.
It was like, well, okay, enjoy. And I did struggle with that. And then COVID came in.
Yeah.
And I found that quite a challenge to be clear. And there was a lot of things went on in my private life and so forth. So it was a real change for me to find out what my next chapter would be and how I can feel comfortable with that.
Yeah.
That's just, I'd be lying if I said anything else. But I've been a CEO for over 30 years.
Yeah.
That was a big change.
Yeah. Is there anything you would have done differently?
The reality is, unfortunately, to be successful, people keep talking about this magic, rising star that, you're going to be an Atlassian or whatever. They're rare. I mean, to do this stuff, you got to sacrifice.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things I'm sorry for.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things I could have done differently.
Yeah.
Probably not. I mean, because running a business like this, it's all about, if you want to be successful, it's all about retention of control, retention of shareholding. And to do that means that you don't sell out early, and you've got to build the bigger business you build, the more you return. So I guess what I learned was it didn't make me happy. Getting money didn't necessarily make me happy, and that wasn't rewarding. And that was a bit of a surprise. So I guess I would have perhaps spent a bit more time in my own personal relationship, I suppose. I think I let a lot of that go, and I let a lot of my health go for a while. I think it was just all encompassing for quite a few years.
Yeah, so it's important to keep that balance.
Absolutely.
Yeah, mate. You mentioned about the family side of things, and one of your sons has been there since he was 17. So he's been working in the business now for half his life. Family business can always be challenging because for non-family members, really you've got the business and the employment relationship. The emotional aspect that comes from having family members in there adds a whole different and third dynamic to it. How did you effectively manage that? In terms of, I'll get you to touch on the family coming into the business and did they have to jump through any different hoops than anybody else to, I guess, get in? That whole merit versus family type introduction, and have you balanced, I guess, that emotional aspect with the family members that are in the business?
Well, because we started from such a small base, I was lucky in the fact that it wasn't just my son. At the time, I had, even before the software, I had a nephew, my wife's my sister's oldest boy, Bo. Now he started when he was 18. Yeah, he's now 43. So, and he's a strategy manager. He did his degree, his MBA, his postgrad, his MBA, all with the company. Yeah. I've had a niece, she started when she's 18, she'd be 30, 35. Yeah. Yeah. So it was quite a while, but it was really interesting in the fact that they had a lot of ownership and pride, and they really put in over and above. And you got to understand that at the time, we were growing so quickly that if you had if you could find somebody who was smart enough and happened to be your son, you grab them. And there was a lot of that. In fact, there was a lot of our kids' mates from school. Yeah. I'd go. They all went to St. Ignatius, and I'd go to the school and I'd know all their mates and that. I'd say, what's Fred doing? Yeah. Because Fred's smart. Just grab him. In fact, we had one guy called Aaron Mullins who was from Ignatius, and he ended up being the Australian general manager. Now he's the regional director for Salesforce. He's 28. Yeah. 29. We've got another one, Matt Lovell, who works as the regional sales director for Adaptive in New York. Yeah. So we've had huge success stories from these kids coming through, and they're still Cairns people. They still, text. Yeah. Another one who named the children after me. So I mean, we've had some huge successes with these kids coming through. Yeah. That's been a great part of the journey. Yeah. So it hasn't been a major problem, except when when people got my dad got senior, and I didn't think it was good for our relationship. Yeah. Yeah.
No, interesting, mate. And this is a little segue that will go down. You've spoken a little bit about your recruitment process there. So as you're growing, you're recruiting. Your sons or family are of good character, and what their values and their behaviours and things like that look like, and what they're delivering in the business. And generally, like attracts like. So then the natural step is, well, let's go and recruit your family's mates. And it's interesting that a lot of employers don't go to their existing team, regardless of whether they're family or not, and get them to do the recruiting for them. And I think that it makes a lot of sense that if you've got good people that work for you, generally they'll hang out with other good people. So naturally they'll generally find somebody that, would suit your culture and business at the same time. And that recruiting stream is often overlooked.
Absolutely. We've had a terrific, as we were growing rapidly, we had terrific results from that. You know, I would certainly say that would have been the way to go. And I mean, obviously, as you get bigger, you have to have more typical recruitment type approach. But there are some things that, I think that have made it. People want to, especially young people, they want variety. They want a feeling of achievement. They want a feeling of fun and comradeship.
Mm.
Yeah. And if you can develop a positive environment where they enjoy each other's company, and I always made a point of rotating young, talented people through to the UK, making sure they got to go to Sri Lanka and look at the office there. And, I think you really got to get down to that sort of relationship building with key people, especially the young people, so that they feel ownership. And once they feel ownership for your business, the job's half done. Yeah.
No, it's a great share. Mate, recently, and I know you've always had a big community sense or, responsibility in that sector. You've supported a lot of grassroots, sports clubs and other things. Recently, you've set up your own charitable foundation. Tell us about, some of your community stuff and now the foundation and why that's important and how it aligns to your goals and purpose.
Yes, community is very important to me personally, and that was reinforced my time in local government and even state government, where I travelled around the countryside a lot and played a lot of footy in regional areas. And I really enjoyed the fabric, the backbone of the country around regional rural areas. So we've always supported sporting clubs like yourself, sponsored. I think we had 9 or 10 on the go at one stage, and we enjoyed that. We enjoyed making sure we got their T-shirts and so forth. Bit of an issue this year, we're supporting Goodwood Saints and Old Higgies, and they're both in A1, so that might be a bit of fun. I was very lucky that, I came from a background that probably wouldn't be typical of being success. I think I went to 7 primary schools. I went to 4 high schools. I was somebody that if somebody made a bet could have been doing what I'm doing now. Not many people would have picked me. I'm pretty sure. And I was given some opportunities, one by the government. I got a cadetship in those days, to go to university. I didn't know I was going to pay for it. And that $164 a month I got, or whatever it was like gold for me. And I got advice from people, friends, parents of friends of mine. And I remember I did quite well in year 11, and I said, oh, shit, I did better than what I thought. And they said, why wouldn't you? Why couldn't you do more? So I got encouragement and direction from others.
Yeah.
And then when I was at Manapara, I saw a lot of things in some of the suburbs there, which was, upsetting in a lot of ways. You don't want to go into some of the things I saw there or what was happening. And I always thought of the waste of talent. The foundation we've set up, we've got a name for it. It's called the Sliding Doors Foundation.
Mm-hmm.
And the concept is to provide a sliding doors moment for young achievers who may not have the capabilities or capacities to succeed. So we believe that if young people have the drive, what we're doing, we're setting up criteria, and we've got the first 2 starting at Trinity College this year. What we're doing is we're looking at a number of criteria. One is obviously the demographic area.
Mm-hmm.
2 is the personal circumstances of the person involved. 3 is their capacity for leadership.
Mm-hmm.
and wanting to be success. So we're not trying, and the 4th is, their ability to work in the community and what sort of community person they have. So the aim is to start providing initially academic opportunity and then business opportunities for young people who satisfy those criteria. And the idea is we would like to sort of extend that to others. And we have now set up the parameters where other people, other business can donate to the foundation. And, the aim is to look at, kids going from year 6 to year 7, but also kids that perhaps have, gone through the state system that may struggle at the university level, and indeed to look at trades and opportunity for developing
that's
at that level. That's basically what we're going to try to do.
Yeah. Great initiative, mate. Well done. You mentioned a couple of things earlier in relation to some of the struggles you had around transition and things like that. We've obviously been through COVID, which has created dramas globally, not just in Australia. What are some of the other obstacles that you've faced, during the development of the business or your career, and how have you overcome them?
Well, I think when you look at the business, it's always been about capitalisation and about funding the rate of growth you need. It has always been probably the biggest challenge. The second thing was, when you grow internationally, having the right linkages to get the right people.
Yeah.
It's always a challenge. People are a long way away. You can't be there all the time. There's a lot of people out there who want to get paid a lot, not do much. There was that. And then sort of the linkage of cultures.
Yeah.
What culture you might have in Australia might not work in the US, it won't, etc. So there was that sort of whole culture, building a global brand as opposed to a local brand. So there were things that were really challenging, getting the cost structures right. Personally, it was not being able to provide, be as good as husband or as good as father, or missing a lot of things. I missed a lot of things. Yeah. I think that became that was a real problem. Burnout's it's a big issue, I think, for people. Or, when you're younger, you think it's something, something for, something that's not there, it's not relevant. But, I think the positive is that, we got support from the government in the early days. We got some grant funding and so forth to help with prototypes. And, so, there was some good support around from that perspective.
Yeah. Do you have a life motto?
Well, I do. It's funny enough, I read this thing, I think, when I was about 18. You're not old enough, but I am. When you used to go in the public service, everybody had a desk calendar.
Yeah.
And every day had a saying on it.
Yeah.
You turn it over the next day. And I still remember as clear as day, walking in and looking at this calendar, it said, a coward dies many deaths, a brave man dies but once. Always stuck with me about this thing about, you can't control what you can't control. Make sure that you're giving your life the best, getting the most out of your life and trying to do the best you can, and take the risk to do it. Don't second guess yourself. And I've always tried to be my own person and to not worry about what other people think or try to be anybody's image or anything like that, but back yourself. And yes, things won't always go right, but you'll get there.
Cool. Mate, this has been a lot of fun. Thank you for joining me remotely. I really appreciate you giving up your time.